The Ghost Town, A Tale of Lost Souls. The first thing Abena noticed was the silence. It wasn't the gentle, lulling quiet of her village at dusk, where the chatter of cicadas and the rustling of palm fronds accompanied the fading sun. This silence was heavy, unnatural, pressing against her ears like a shroud. She was lying on her back, her dress soaked and clinging to her skin, the taste of river water bitter on her tongue. Above her, the sky was a deep, bruised purple, the last light of day fading into shadow. Her body felt cold, as though she had been underwater far longer than she remembered. What had happened? The memory came in fragments: the swollen stream, the pull of the current, her desperate gasp for air. She had been drowning, she was sure of it. Yet here she was, alive. Abena sat up slowly, her limbs aching, and looked around. This wasn't the stream she knew. The familiar banks of Nsumia were gone, replaced by a vast river that glimmered faintly in the twilight. On the far side, a town stood in eerie stillness, its cobblestone streets glowing faintly as if lit from within. A rustling sound behind her made her whip around, her heart racing. A man stood there, his face shadowed by the dim light. He was tall, with an air of calm authority, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her shiver. "You're safe now," he said, his voice low and measured. "Who are you?" Abena asked, her voice trembling. "A friend," he replied. "But you shouldn't have been in the water." As she tried to talk, her words faltered as he stepped closer. There was something otherworldly about him, something she couldn't quite place. "Go to the town," he said, gesturing toward the distant glow. "They'll take care of you." Before she could ask more, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the trees as if swallowed by the shadows. Abena's instincts screamed at her to run, to find her way back to her village, but she was disoriented. The river was unfamiliar, and the night pressed in around her. The town, with its faint glow, seemed to be her only option. As she approached, the silence grew heavier, broken only by the sound of her footsteps on the cobblestones. The streets were empty at first, but then people began to emerge from their homes. They moved with an unnatural grace, their faces lit with warm smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. "Welcome," they said in unison, their voices soft and melodic. Abena hesitated. "Where am I?" "You're home," one of them replied, stepping forward. She was an older woman with kind eyes that seemed to glimmer faintly in the dim light. "Come, child. You must be tired." "Thank you," Abena said, accepting the older woman's help. "But I don't understand. Where am I? How did I get here?" The woman's smile didn't falter, but her eyes seemed to darken ever so slightly. "You're safe. That's all that matters." "But my village?" "Hush now," the woman interrupted gently. "You belong here." Abena's stomach twisted, but she said nothing. She sat by the riverbank, nibbling on the bread, her gaze fixed on the water. Its surface was unnaturally still, reflecting the sky like a mirror. She thought about the stranger who had saved her, his cryptic words haunting her. The days turned into weeks, and Abena began to settle into life in the town. Yet, the oddities piled up. The people never seemed to tire, their routines unchanging. Food never spoiled, and flowers bloomed year-round. Even the children's games remained the same, as though time had frozen them in place. She tried to shake the feeling that she was being watched, but the townsfolk were always near, their smiles unwavering. At night, she dreamed of the stream, of its cold embrace and the sound of rushing water that never seemed to fade. One evening, she ventured to the river again, hoping to find answers. The water glimmered under the moonlight, and as she stared into its depths, a ripple distorted her reflection. A familiar face appeared beside hers, the stranger who had saved her. "You again," she said, her voice a mixture of relief and frustration. "Who are you?" "I'm no one," he replied calmly. But I am the reason you're here. Why? She demanded. Why am I here? What is this place? The man's expression softened, a trace of sorrow flickering in his eyes. The stream didn't just carry you. It claimed you. This is where those who are neither here nor there come to rest. Rest. Abena echoed, her voice trembling. You mean? I'm dead. Not quite, he said. But not alive either. Her chest tightened, panic rising like a tide. I feel alive. I breathe, I eat. Because this place lets you, he said. But it isn't real. None of it is. She reached out to him, but the image vanished, leaving only her reflection. Determined to escape, Abena began exploring the outskirts of the town. She tried walking past the river, but the further she went, the more disoriented she became. The landscape seemed to look back on itself, always returning her to the town. One night, she confided in a young boy named Kwaku, one of the few townsfolk who seemed genuinely curious about her. Do you ever wonder what's beyond this place? She asked him. Kwaku tilted his head. There's nothing beyond. This is all there is. But don't you want to see more? He shrugged. We are safe here. That's all that matters. The words, so often repeated, sent a chill through her. Safe, they said. But from what? The answer came unexpectedly. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Abena heard a sound that didn't belong, the sharp jingle of a bicycle bell. Her heart raced as she ran to the main street. A figure approached, pedaling hard, his silhouette framed by the dying light. Dust clung to his clothes, and his face was etched with weariness. Kojo, she whispered, her voice cracking. Abena, he shouted, jumping off the bicycle and running toward her. He grabbed her by the shoulders, his eyes wide with disbelief. It's really you. Tears blurred her vision as she threw her arms around him. Kojo, how did you find me? I was traveling and stopped here to rest, he said breathlessly. But Abena, what is this place? You've been gone for years. Everyone thought you drowned. I didn't drown, she said, shaking her head. I was saved. This town, these people, they've taken care of me. Kojo's face turned pale. He glanced at the townsfolk, who had gathered silently around them, their smiles unchanging. No, Abena, he said, his voice trembling. This isn't a town. It's a graveyard. A place for lost souls. Her knees buckled as his words hit her like a thunderclap. No, she whispered, shaking her head. That's not true. I'm alive. I'm right here. Look around. He shouted. These people, they are not alive. And neither are you. The crowd of townsfolk shimmered, their forms flickering like candle flames. Their smiles twisted into something eerie, their once kind eyes now hollow. Come with me, Kojo said, grabbing her hand. We can leave. I'll take you home. Abena tried to follow, but an invisible force rooted her to the ground. The air grew heavy, pressing against her chest. I can't, she choked out, tears streaming down her face. The stream claimed me, Kojo. I can't leave. No. He shouted, pulling at her. You're my sister. I won't leave you here. The first rays of dawn broke over the town, and the townsfolk began to fade into the light, their forms dissolving like mist. Abena turned to Kojo, her heart breaking. Go, she whispered. Leave. Tell them I love them. Abena. Please, she begged. You can't stay here. This place will take you too. Kojo hesitated, his face crumpling in anguish. But finally, he let go of her hand and turned away, his sobs echoing in the stillness. Abena watched him disappear into the light, her chest hollow with despair. The townsfolk reappeared, their smiles returning as they encircled her. From that day, Abena stopped hoping for escape. She spent her evenings by the river, staring into its depths, waiting for the day it might carry her to peace. But the river remained silent, and so did her heart.